Hey, Sam, you come up with that intro line?
You didn't tell me that was today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Writers' Room with Sam and Jim. On our show, we like to invite aspiring writers into our podcast Writers' Room, help them work on and develop their stories. We appreciate it when you help us out by going to Apple Podcasts and hitting the subscribe button. We also love it when you rate and review us. And we'd like to invite you, too, to join us in our conversation on Facebook at the Writers' Room with Sam and Jim. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the Sam and Jim. Now, we're going to do something unusual today. We're doing a scene study. Today, we're with Macenzie Rebelo and her script Sins, and we're going to get into that now.
Hello, Macenzie. It's Sam.
Hi, Macenzie.
Hey, how are you guys?
Thanks for being on the writing show. What is this called again? The Writers' Room with Sam and Jim. Once again, to remind everybody that's listening to the show, Macenzie was on. You wrote that show Sins, and it was a great idea for a writer. Mystery writer, why don't you tell us, what was it? Remind everybody, if they haven't heard that particular podcast, what it's about.
So basically, it's about a true crime author who's washed up. She returns back to her hometown for a family funeral, and then she ends up getting herself involved in a crime that happens in her city.
I know we had a lot of fun with that one, and I'm so excited because today we're doing Scene Study Day.
Yes.
It's not as bad as Picture Day at middle school, but it's not quite a snow day. It's somewhere in the middle.
There's a little bit of high school theater about it.
Right. Because we're going to do something that's so wrong, which is Jim, JR, and I are going to read your scenes out loud and actually not really act, because that would be too big of a word for what we're going to do, but especially me. But we're going to do your scenes out loud.
Okay.
We have a camera on you don't know about, so we can watch you cringe.
I know. And I think this is always a really hard thing for writers, and also a really great thing sometimes, both in the sense of the process where we get to hear, and you hear, of course, every imperfection is going to be a 10 out of 10 in your ears, and everything that works is going to be like whatever. But
luckily, most of the imperfections will be in our performance, not in the
yes, you can always blame the actors. Writers do that all the time. Kudos to you for your bravery. Not only are you having us read it out loud, but we're doing it in front of a bunch of people you don't know in the podcast. So this will be interesting. And so just take your notes or your thoughts, or do nothing, or just keep drinking, and we'll get to the end. And I'm excited.
Okay.
I'm excited. So sit back, Macenzie, and let us butcher your work.
Okay, perfect.
Before we do that, Macenzie, can you set up this scene a little bit for us? Just tell us the context of it in your script.
Yeah, so this is in the middle of the script. The script is the pilot. It's about an hour long, so this is about half an hour in. Basically, Helen, the main character, returns from the funeral of her stepfather, and then she goes back to her mom's house for just like a little get-together for food and drinks and things like that, and basically an unexpected guest arrives, and it caused some sort of conflict between the characters.
Okay.
And the character's name, they're Sins. Sins is their last name.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Perfect name.
Here we go. Interior, Sin's family home foyer, evening. Helen sprints down the stairs and swings the front door open. Patrick stands on the other side, holding up a large bouquet of flowers.
Hi.
Helen sighs loudly.
What are you doing here?
Louisa comes running down the stairs, dressed in a bathrobe. Auntie Gail stands by the railing. Louisa embraces Patrick and kisses him on the cheek. Come in, come in. Patrick hands Louisa the bouquet of flowers.
I am so incredibly sorry for your loss, Louisa. Ken was always so kind to me.
Louisa cups Patrick's face. Louisa looks down at herself. How embarrassing. I'm not dressed. Give me a minute. Make yourself comfortable. Just then, JJ opens the front door, joining the group of people. He awkwardly stops. Interior living room evening. JJ sits on the couch between Patrick and Helen.
I can't believe you actually showed up.
Your mother invited me.
So you came?
What was I supposed to do, Hel?
Helen scoffs.
God, don't call me that.
Louisa and Auntie Gail enter the living room. Louisa is dressed in a black dress. Patrick sits up and hugs Louisa again.
I'm so sorry for missing the funeral.
Louisa squeezes Patrick tight. Oh, don't apologize. Helen rolls her eyes. Helen, you must make us some coffee, would you? 1 sugar, Patrick?
2.
Helen and Patrick look at each other, and Helen leaves the room. Interior, kitchen, evening. Helen boils a cup of water. JJ enters the room and helps.
Are you okay?
I can't believe she invited him.
Maybe Ken wanted him to be here.
Doubt it. She did it to punish me.
For what?
Being her daughter.
Do you want me to say something?
Helen pours the coffee into mugs. She hands some to JJ.
I just want to get out of here as soon as possible.
Interior living room evening. Helen and JJ hand the cups of tea to everybody. So how have you been, Patrick?
Great. I've been great. Work is great. Life is...
Great?
Yes.
Beat. The sounds of sipping coffee fills the awkward silence in the room. Helen stares at Patrick, which makes him choke on his coffee.
Did you guys hear about the Garlands?
I know, it's awful, just awful.
Did you guys hear or see anything?
Helen raises her eyebrows. The police asked us, but we didn't hear or see anything.
Did you guys know them well, or...?
Helen clears her throat.
All of a sudden, you're all of a sudden interested.
Yeah, well...
Helen frowns at Patrick. Why don't we check the news? JJ turns on the television and changes it to the news. Close up on television. A photograph of Danny Garland is placed on the screen. Daniel Garland has made no official statement regarding the unusual circumstances. The talk show host fades into the background. Such a shame.
That's Daniel Garland?
Yeah, the nephew.
And he killed...
Not confirmed.
I think I've met him.
What? Where?
I mean, he woke me up last night. I think so. It looks like him.
What are you saying? What did he say?
Helen looks deeply at the television. JJ begins to sniff loudly.
Do you guys smell that?
They all start to sniff. Smells like smoke. Helen sits up and looks out the window.
And scene.
See?
Bravo, Mackenzie.
Thank you.
How are you? Are you?
I'm good.
Are you
You're
feeling...
not traumatized?
No, I'm used to it because in my university, in the classes, we would have to read our scripts all the time. So, like, all the trauma, I think, has set me up for this.
So you've got a little scar tissue built right over your soul.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, for sure. I got some good walls built up there.
Great. Well, let's get into it. So, as you heard, my amazing performance as both Patrick and JJ. What's your takeaway from it? What do you feel? How do you feel like the scenes are coming across or not coming across? How do you feel about it?
My biggest thing is always dialogue, making it sound realistic enough so that it sounds like a natural conversation, and also just the repetition of words. You know, like saying the same thing too much. I also just want to make sure that I know it's just a scene, but it's kind of like one of those things where is the scene important or is it overall like benefiting the story?
Right. All right. That's a very good question. We definitely want to have scenes, important scenes.
Right.
That's really helpful to keep people.
Yes.
I think the dialogue's fine as far as the words and how people sound. That's what people sound like.
They sounded very natural.
And we've talked about this before, but if people actually put on subtitles on closed caption stuff on when they're watching TV, I think they'd be struck by how simple the dialogue is. You know, if you just watch a television show, just watch it with the subtitles or closed captioning, and it's just so simple. Don't you think so?
And it's so rare that people say each other's names, too.
Yeah, they almost never do.
If you had closed captioning on real life, you would find out how rarely you say someone's name.
Yeah. In fact, when I say my wife's name, she looks at me funny. Like, and she'll say, "Okay, Sam," as if I said something. Like, okay, but I don't think those are the issues for you. Any of these.
Okay.
I think the thing that we want to probably get into is I don't know how anybody feels about anything, and I think what's happening is, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I think when you're reading these lines to yourself or writing them, you are conjecturing. You're inserting that point of view into the reading of it, but as someone who's never seen it before, and I'll just say this, on page 1, there's only one adjective. In the entire scene, there's 2, and one's an adverb.
Okay.
So there's no way that we would know how these characters are feeling, what their attitudes are in the scene at all, in almost all these scenes. In fact, as an actor, as the performer, looking for the soul of the work, I didn't know how to say anything because I didn't know how everyone was feeling. And I was worried that I was going to fail you and I was going to read this line completely wrong.
The only thing reading Helen, like, because she sighs loudly and says, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah.
I know that she doesn't want Patrick around. Why? I'm not sure. And I don't feel like there's no confrontation between them. I have no clear sense of what their issues are.
Right.
Okay.
What do you think, Mackenzie? Does that, you understand that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for sure. I always have a hard time with that because I don't know how much is too much for that stuff because I don't want to take away like anything from the reading, like the performance. So I don't know if I'm putting too much action into it because it's kind of like a thing where the actors kind of take it their own way.
If you characterize things when you're first setting up the scene, it can usually do a lot. For example, Helen sighs loudly, can't believe that Patrick showed up. Yeah. Just something like that. Or you can't believe Patrick shows up after he left her at the altar.
Right.
Something like that. And I'm like, okay, well, now I know how to read this character the whole time.
Okay.
That's exactly right. And here's the thing. This is so great because I get to make this simple for you. First of all, there are no actors involved in this script for a very long time, maybe never. Right?
Don't worry about the actors.
So don't worry about the actors.
Okay.
It doesn't matter because you need people to read the script and understand it, right? Your intention. And so forget about the actors.
There's a difference between a reading script and a production script. This is a reading script.
Right. Now, we're not saying that when you write a scene, you can say, Helen comes in thinking about her third grade teacher that she really hated and it makes her mad, right? Obviously, no actor
can portray that.
But Helen sprints down the stairs panicked or furious. You know, she can't believe that Patrick showed up here, which you're about to pay when she says, what are you doing here? That you can do. Just try to imagine, could Helen Mirren perform that? Could Meryl Streep perform it? And the answer is almost always yes. So you're basically stopping on level 1 or 2 of description, and you have 8 more that are available to you. Okay. Tell us the story. If you are going more than 1 or 2 sentences without telling us someone's perspective on what they are doing, then you're writing choreography. And we don't need choreography because I don't know what the Sins family home foyer is, and for God's sakes, I don't want you to describe it to me if it's just a regular old foyer, unless the things that are in there are giving me a feeling and giving my characters a feeling.
Which I'll bring to another point here. Like in the way you've written these scenes, there are action lines coming between almost every exchange of dialogue, right? It's pretty much someone speaks, then there's a characterization, there's an action line, then there's speech. And that it kind of disrupts the flow, right? There's a lot of this stuff, and I'm a writer too, right? We get into a scene and we start wanting to describe everything, what happens. She walks over, she touches his face, and in a way that's creating the mood and the tone of the scene, but it does get in the way of the read, and it tends to make it hard to track the conversation and what's happening. A lot of times, if you give a blanket description of what someone's attitude is towards the top, you cover several exchanges of dialogue until something changes the way that person's feeling about things. So if I know that Helen doesn't want Patrick's here, but Louisa is happy to see him, if you tell me that, well then, one line about she goes over to him and takes his arm or something. Now I know, well, the actor is going to be playing nice with Patrick the whole time. She doesn't have to touch his face. I don't need all the details of how she's behaving towards him because I get it.
Not only don't need, do not want.
Yes.
Because it just works against you because it clutters, and then I don't know what's important.
Right.
Do you know what I mean, Macenzie?
Okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So when you write, Louisa cups Patrick's face, pointless. And yet, could be beautiful, could be tender, could be angrily, could be so many things. But
unless he screams in pain because he has a cyst in his jaw, it doesn't matter because it doesn't change the scene. It doesn't affect what happens next or what people say next.
Boy, that was a very weird system.
I was just going like, what would happen? Why would cupping someone's face matter? Well, because they scream, right?
Right.
Like,
so those, and I just want you to know, Jim writes this way, so I'm used to, not without the characterizations, but when he's writing, I'll see how he's walking through the scene, and he's doing the different things. And usually he'll start cutting stuff out way before, if I see that scene, if we're working on it together, he'll go back and trim it all out, right? But a lot of times when he gives it to me, I will then see what he's going for because he's already done all the heavy lifting, and I start trimming that stuff out too because I'm like, oh no, he found this. This is the money. This is the thing. And now all I'm looking for is what everything else that he wrote supports that cool thing.
It's kind of like when you go mining for gold as you build scenes like this. You get a whole pan full of dirt and you run it underwater and you keep shaking it until you have just the gold left and everything else is washed away, and that takes time.
Yeah.
So let's let Macenzie talk more now. And let me ask you a couple questions. Why is it important that Louisa is not dressed when she says, how how embarrassing. I'm not dressed. Give me a minute. Make yourself comfortable. Why is that important? Why does that have to be in your script?
So it doesn't have to be in my script. I basically included it because I wanted to show that the difference between Helen's relationship with her mother and Patrick, her ex-husband's relationship, because it's kind of intimate to like walk into someone's house for it not to be your house and that parent or that person that owns the house is like in their pajamas and like greets you. Like for me anyway, that's always like, oh, like we're close because it's not weird. And that's kind of why I put that in there, because Louisa feels comfortable like addressing him and speaking to him and being like, oh, let me just go change quickly. Whereas with like her own daughter, it's kind of like awkward and kind of embarrassing and uncomfortable.
Well, then let me ask you the next question. None of that really made sense to me yet. So because I don't know what the scene's about yet. So what's the scene about? Yeah. What's the most important thing about this scene?
So this scene is basically the when Helen is reunited back with Patrick after their divorce. She hasn't seen him in a long time, and he basically shows up to her house unbeknownst to her, but her mother invited him over. Basically, she's seeing him again after all this time, and there's just this awkward confrontation or like tension in the air between them.
So they haven't been seen each other for a long time. They were together, and now the total emotion that we have there is Helen sighs loudly.
Okay.
Now, I want to say for a moment, Jim did an excellent job with that sigh. It was so long, and he threw it right into the line, and I do not want to take away with it, all right? But I have a feeling that you would not react that way. How would you react? What's another way? What's really going on? Forget about how we're going to write it. What's really going on with Helen in that moment? What is she feeling?
Just like complete frustration and irritation mostly. It's not even like hatred at that point. It's just like being irritated, kind of like a bug that won't like go away type of thing. So I wanted her reaction not to be over the top because she's at this point, she's used to it. She's just irritated because like there's no escape type of thing.
Now, that's interesting. There's no escape. Irritated is very mild, right? Maybe mild plus.
Okay.
Now, maybe in Canada, mild plus is a rage. I don't know.
It kind of is.
But if that's the totality of their reaction, then the scene is about basically slight irritation. So, you know what I'm saying? It's just about slight irritation. But you don't want a whole scene. Do you want a whole scene about slight irritation?
Yeah, no.
So what do you think the scene's about in that context, if it can be? If it's not about slight irritation, what could it be about then?
I guess it's just about them being reunited, and then there's that moment where he starts to ask about the Garlands, and like it's supposed to spark a kind of like a competitiveness tension between them because they're both writers, investigative writers, and she's just kind of like, why are you so interested? Almost like he had a false motive for coming over, instead of he, came over to say it was for Ken, but it was actually to get information out of the neighbors of the murdered couple.
So the thing that I thought when the first time I read this before he performed it was better when he performed it, I have to say, is that I felt like you could probably compress a lot of this.
Okay.
Because I think if you had a moment off the top where, say, for example, she opens the door and he's there and she steps out on the porch with him and says, "What are you doing here?" Like some of the pieces that come up deeper into the scene where she's expressing her irritation that he ever came here, why did my mom invite you? Some of that stuff, if I knew that off the top, right, and we saw this flicker of genuine emotion and that irritation coming out between them, and I understood that he was there, I might begin to wonder, well, why is he here if she's so irritated and doesn't want to see him? But then suddenly Louise is there, spots him, and welcomes him in, so she's stuck with him. Well, now I'm living with all this emotion that I've already learned about and I know exists between them as they go in, and she's watching this thing on TV. If there was something about Helen, even just a glance looking at him, wondering, why he's really here, something to tease this idea that that he came here for some other reason. But it would help if I had a little clearer picture off the very top, setting up the thing.
Yeah.
The idea that Louisa loves having him here and always liked him or things like that is great.
I mean, we need conflict. I think that's what Jim and I are looking for.
Okay.
And it's so mild right now that you're not living in the conflict because you're saying, well, they're not that mad. Well, then I'm like, then it's not a drama.
Yeah.
It's a conversation between two people that I'm not all that sure why I'm there.
Okay.
Everything's got to be fraught. Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. So now let's talk about what's really singing with it, which is people do sound like people. You say that before, and there's no you're not going off and using big words, and I would not worry about you repeating words and all that stuff. You don't, but I don't think that's a huge thing.
No, I don't either.
People do repeat words all the time, so it's not. I think writers make themselves a little crazy when you're like, I repeated this word twice in the last page, and I refuse to allow that.
Yeah, you got to let go of that. And I'm married to Minnesota, right? Who, much like Canadians, it's not, they share more than a border. They tend to under-express things at times. And that can be a real gift, right? Like when I was reading this, it was reminding of a stage play. I felt like there were people dancing around things, right? I got a sense of that. I just wasn't quite clear on everyone's perspective of those things they're dancing around.
Right.
You need a couple moments where you actually state out loud what those things are. But there was a really nice sense of there's multiple agendas in the room or multiple perspectives on this guy coming here and what that means.
Mm-hmm. Jim's wife, Lisa, she says she had this joke. I'm going to butcher it, and it's not even a joke, but she said those Norwegians, which she is half Norwegian, they don't express their emotions because if you're stuck in a cabin for 8 months of the year together, you better not express every emotion.
The last thing you want to know is how somebody feels.
That's right. Having said that, though, they are feeling as much as the most exuberant, emotional, and emotive person ever. Because it's just right under there. And by the way, they're communicating it all to each other with sighs and hesitations and what they don't say. There's a ton of communication coming out.
Always lots of communication. It's just not verbal.
Right?
Yeah.
So you don't have to be, to bolster what Jim was saying, it's not about being completely verbal, but it's about you laying out what is actually happening in the scene.
And it's where like things like cupping his face doesn't necessarily matter, but if it's a sigh that makes Helen look at her mom and think X, she's really saying this, or Helen knows that what her mom means by that is this, well, that could help.
Okay.
And you can't lean on sighs and grunts and that. There's so many interpretations of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it means so many different things. So let's move on. Now we got that scene where with JJ. Tell us a little bit about JJ. What's his deal?
So he's like the only family member that Helen has that she actually feels like she's close to and is like an actual family to her. And he's kind of like her only comfort there. Like he doesn't like Patrick. He's very much like on Helen's side, and he's kind of like he's like the only voice of reason really in the family. Like everyone in the family's kind of crazy, and he's like the normal cousin.
Right. Yeah. So JJ sits on the couch between Patrick and Helen, tells me where everyone is in the room, but I don't know what the feeling is in the room. Is it thick? Is it tense?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's supposed to be like tense and awkward.
Yeah. We need that in the action lines. We need to know what's happening.
What are the emotions being played? It's more important than the physical actions, really, is how should I be reading these lines?
Yeah, I mean, Helen could be looking at Patrick and saying, like, just looking at him, the way she looks at him, disgusted, annoyed, angry, and then instead of saying, I can't believe you actually showed up, she just say, you showed up. But I know her point of view, and it's almost subtext, I can't believe you actually showed up. You could do it any way you want, but I'll know because you laid out how she's feeling.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, what is this scene about? Because let's talk about turns now, Jim. So what's this scene about?
It's supposed to be kind of like a window into the relationship with the Sims family and the Garlands family, and kind of give you a sense of like just where they are within the town, because this is like when you learn that they're neighbors and they're close in proximity, and that also they kind of had a relationship with them because Patrick mentions like, or Louisa mentions like we spoke to the police, we didn't hear, we didn't see anything.
Right.
So I was trying to like kind of combine both worlds there so that it kind of made like this town seem even smaller because like they're all so close. Like everybody knows everybody.
Right. Okay. I have a thought that might help with this. So very little of that is actually understandable to me in this scene. Okay.
Okay.
But I think it's because you're trying for too many things in a scene. All those things are so hard to get in. And what I'm looking for is what's the turn? What's the thing that changes the trajectory of the actors, the characters in the scene?
Okay.
Is there one? Do you have a thought of what it could be?
Honestly, no. I don't think so. Like the thing is, when I was writing it, I was just feeling I just didn't know exactly. It was honestly felt like I was playing the game, like the board game Clue. And I was like trying to figure it out myself.
Right.
And I was kind of like, what would this character do and why would they say this? And that I was just going off of more dialogue that was pushing the scene rather than action, which is like there needs to be more action in there because I can't like rely on dialogue to be like forwarding the motion of the scene.
That's right.
Well, and it's the emotional reaction to the dialogue, right? It's really the emotions and the impact of people's words on each other that give you that kind of motion without action within a scene, right? Like it feels in the scene like Helen's reaction to what she sees on the TV, that feels like it's affecting her, but it's not clear why. And she doesn't tell someone why. It's everything's left just a little opaque. And I think that's your problem through here. I can feel you feeling your way through these conversations with the characters, and you're building the scenes and putting them in them and walking them through, and that's good. Like that's all good stuff, and your characters sound like themselves as they talk to each other.
And that's part of the process, right?
Exactly. Like it's step one, right? You walk through all this stuff, but then you need to hold on to the things where something's actually changed in the scene, and get quicker to that moment and live in it. If she's recognizing something on the TV that's hitting her, let her voice that. Let her say that to someone, even if it's a separate scene where she runs out and someone comes in with her because you don't want person X to have heard what she said. But the audience needs to feel it with her, why that's significant, and get a little more knowledge about what's going on. Why did this change her?
Okay. Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
If we could get back to turns. Turns are a change in direction, and do you have to have a turn in every scene? No, not every scene. But certainly the majority of them, and the vast probably majority of them, a significant change.
90-odd%.
And if you come up with that first, then you know where you're going to in the scene. Now you know things are going to change. So is there a scene that we read that had a turn that you liked in particular, that you thought, all right, this is a good example of what I'm going for?
I think the part that maybe best kind of got it was towards the end with the TV, and she kind of like, oh, that's their nephew. That's when Patrick is asking about if they know who the Garland's nephew is.
Right.
Daniel. And then that kind of like sparks up the conversation. That's kind of where in the direction I was wanting it to go, to be more kind of like they were jumping off of each other, asking each other questions.
But what's the turn? So are you saying all of a sudden he's interested, but he wasn't before?
I guess the turn would be that when Daniel comes up on the screen, Helen realizes that she's met this person before.
Oh.
That he's not a stranger.
And is that clear in there? Let me see. Did I miss that?
It's sort of there?
She says, I think I've met him.
Okay.
But she doesn't confirm it to anyone in the room there.
And that's the turn I was talking about. Like it feels like that changes Helen. But it feels to me like in this sequence that you have here, you could almost do, she opens the door and sees Patrick standing there and says, what the hell, what are you doing here? And her mom from the balcony says, I invited him. And she looks up and you have that sense of, holy shit, you what? And get that tension, and then cut to a couch and they're watching TV because making coffee and all that stuff. Well, now you have this sort of family tableau with a bunch of people, and the other people want him there, and she doesn't. So whatever the chit-chat between Patrick and these people, she's looking at him going, I don't want you here, and I suspect you're here for ulterior motives, whatever that is. And then this guy comes up on the TV screen.
Right. See, we're just cutting away all the stuff, and then the stuff that you have that actually pops, it really pops, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Now here's the thing. Jim's cut it down so that it's now, and, I'm sorry that he butchered your thing. It's all him. I would have not changed a single word. But when he did that, he was creating an awkward situation. Now we know that she recognizes something, and that's the big turn. So before that, I need to know that she doesn't know what's going on, that she's pissed that she doesn't know, or she's upset, or she's worried or frustrated. And so she needs to say that. I don't understand a single thing that's going on. I'm making this up, by the way, Macenzie. I have no idea what I'm really talking about. But and so I know that she doesn't know anything, and I know why she wants to know something, because she wants to write a book, or because she wants to crack the case, or because of whatever it is. And she is upset about it, and then all of a sudden, snap! Holy shit! I do know that. That's not right.
Yeah. Okay.
And that makes it the turn. And that starts taking that soft turn, and by setting up what her expectations are in exactly the opposite direction, it makes it into a big turn, and that's what you want. Because if you want me to watch your television show, I'm looking to be engaged at all time. It can be character turns, it can be plot story turns that have to do with character and ideally both, but they need to be big. They can't be people serving each other coffee, holding each other's hands, that kind of stuff. Unless it's deeply meaningful, then totally, yes. Emotional turns are awesome, right? But they need to really be deeply felt.
Right. And, there's a lot of things here that happen in this little sequence of scenes that I have no doubt would have happened. I don't need to see them all.
Right.
Once I know that she's uncomfortable with this guy who showed up at the door, and then I see the context of what that means for her to be having to sit with her family with this guy, and they all like him, and she doesn't, and she's questioning why he's here, and maybe in some way could voice the sense of, you just came over here because that guy lived next door, didn't you? Right?
Yes, and then
something like that.
And leave it.
And
And then let's see his response to that.
Right? And
that's
he
really
tries to cover. No, it's I just wanted to pay my respects.
No, that's what you did.
Right, and we know that's what she's thinking. And then all of a sudden, the guy shows up on TV.
Yeah.
This other guy, and she's like, I know him. And then if he expresses some interest, like, what? What do you know about him? Well, that confirms what she thought, right? He did come here because he wanted to know. If that's what's going on, I don't know that it is.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, yeah.
Does that make sense? So we're really trying to get out of the soft. We want drama. We're craving it to distract us from our lives.
Particularly in those long Canadian winters.
Yes.
Right? What do you think, Mackenzie? Are you mad at Jim? Are you mad at Jim?
No, that's definitely the right track. I agree with you 100%. It just needs to be condensed, but also more just drama, like to the point, more at risk. Yeah.
It's about knowing what the character wants and then not giving it to them.
It might help you to take a run at writing these same scenes where everyone just says out loud exactly what they're thinking, exactly how they react when they see each other. And that'll tell you a lot about what's really going on in the scenes. And then when you go back and you cover it up with the nice dialogue.
When you just swap it out. Go ahead and give her an example of that. I think that would really help. Because here's the thing. I think you're too worried about writing shitty dialogue. You know what I mean? It's like we all fear being shitty in one particular way, I think, more than other particular ways.
We don't even want to sound shitty to ourselves by writing the obvious thing.
Right.
But so she greets him at the door and says, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And he says, "I came here to pay respects." And she says,
I would go worse than that. That's too good, Jim. Honestly. I would write, "I can't believe you're here because I'm feeling really angry with you and also a little bit excited that you're here, and that makes me hate myself." Then him saying, "Well, I came because I really wanted to see your face when I showed up to see if you still loved me because I still love you." I swear to God you should write this, right?
Okay.
Because it'll tell you what's going on in the scene, really. It'll force you to do it. And don't make it as good as Jim just did it. Make it as bad as I just did it.
It is one of his gifts.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to be terrible. We have made an art form of it. Right? And by the way, if you pitched that level of shittiness of dialogue that I just said in a writer's room, you would get 8 heads nodding. No one would say, "Oh, what the fuck dialogue is that?" They would just be like, "Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying."
Right. That's okay. Yeah, that's what's going on. And then what happens?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and avoid this phrase when you say something. "I'm trying to set up."
Right.
Okay.
Because that means you're
just
saying,
set it up.
"I have just sacrificed the goodness of this scene on the altar of making another scene great."
Okay. Yeah,
in which case
sense.
I would say, "Well, then why am I reading this? Why are you forcing me to read this scene?" And then you're saying, No, trust me. It's going to be great.
There is no try, only do.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry about that. But you know what I mean, Mackenzie?
Yeah, that makes sense, for sure.
And so I sometimes write when I have a bunch of scenes I have to write, "This scene sucks," and then I go on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay.
And then I come back, and then once I'm done with them, think, "Do I need this scene?" And if I do, I need to set. Can I take this little piece of setup and stick it in somewhere else where no one will notice it? And how do I know if I do? If I have a turn. If there's something, if I know, if I can find a turn, then the scene might be about something. If I can't find a turn, that's a pretty good indication the scene is not about anything, and you are going to torture yourself to try to make it about something. Mackenzie, it's great to talk to you.
Yes, it was good talking to you guys too.
Bravo on finishing this many scenes. I mean, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Everybody talks about, not everybody. As writers, we like to think everybody talks about it, but there are some portion of people out there that think about writing a lot, and you did it, and kudos to you.
Oh, thank you.
You have a dialogue superpower. Don't lose it. Just don't use it on your first pass.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Embrace the shittiness.
Okay.
Thanks, Mackenzie. You be well.
Bye, guys. Take care.
See you, Mackenzie. And that's all we've got for you this week. Our producer, J.R. Zamora-Thal, is working the mixing board.
Our logo was designed by Julien Debar-Monclair, and our music was provided by Buddha-Rays out of Austin, Texas.
If you want to get in touch, we are at The Sam and Jim on Instagram and Twitter. And you can find us on Facebook and YouTube as The Writers' Room with Sam and Jim.
And if you like hanging out in the room with us, give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And tell a friend, would you, so we can get JR paid. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.